Some of you may recognize the name Sheila Welsh. Sheila Welsh, for any of you who don't know, was the famous co-host of the 700 Club, for any of you familiar with the show The 700 Club. And she was also a famous Christian singer and writer. But she looked like she had her life all together. From the outside, she had it all. She had the fancy clothes, the nice public job on national television, a nice house. But in 1992, Sheila hit a wall. That morning, one day, she found herself co-hosting the 700 Club, and that evening, she was locked in a psychiatric hospital. The next morning, a psychiatrist came to ask Sheila a very simple yet profound question. Who are you? And so Sheila said, well, I'm the co-host of the 700 Club. The psychiatrist apparently wasn't satisfied with that answer, and so I asked her a second time, who are you? She said, well, I'm a writer, I'm a singer. Psychiatrist asked her one more time, who are you? To which Sheila finally honestly answered, I have no idea. Whether or not we recognize Sheila or can relate to her lifestyle, I think we can relate to her heart. Of this deep question of identity, of who are you? Who are you really at the core of your heart, of who God has created you to be? And if I were to ask you that question, you might tell me your name, or you might tell me your profession that you currently do or retired from, or you might talk to me about your kids or your family, and all of that is great, right? All that's important pieces of our identity. But who are you really at the core of who God has created you to be? You see, Sheila had been wrestling with this question, and she realized she'd spent her entire life trying to live up to other people's expectations for her life, trying to live up to their demands and what they wanted for her life. And she felt like she was dying on the inside, and she desperately wanted help and healing, but she didn't know what to do or where to turn. In fact, she had thought about checking herself into that psychiatric hospital sooner, but she talked to the other staff members of the 700 Club, and they discouraged her from doing so because they're like, Sheila, if you do this, you'll lose everything. You'll lose your public platform and your reputation. But Sheila eventually reached a point where it didn't matter anymore because she was so dead inside that she felt like she already had lost everything. So she would give up her salary and her house and all of her public image so that she could finally seek healing. And in there, the most darkest moment of Sheila's life, locked in that psychiatric hospital, she discovered who she was for the first time as a beloved child of God, loved with all of her flaws and everything. You and I wrestle with this same question of identity, of who are we? And it's hard in our life because, like Sheila, we have so many people that place expectations and demands on our lives that want certain things from us. And so we have all these competing voices and demands in our lives and expectations. And then we have even things that we place on ourselves, right? Even good things, like we have these spiritual role models and we think, oh, I just want to live my life and be like Mother Teresa, or like Martin Luther King Jr., or like Gandhi, or you name it, right? And while that can be great to seek after these role models, when we die and get to heaven, Jesus isn't going to say, hey, how good were you at being Mother Teresa? Instead, Jesus is going to say, how good at you were being the person I created you to be. Hannah, how good were you at being Hannah and discovering who God created you to be? Janet, how good at you were being Janet. Or Khalil, how good at you were being Khalil, right? That is what God is asking us to do, the work to find out who has God created us to be, as nobody else in this world can be, and to live into that. And this question of identity is a hard one. We know that to be true. Sheila knew that to be true. And so did Jesus. If you think about it, Jesus had a lot of expectations placed on his life and demands from other people, right? His family probably thought he'd work with his hands to carry on the family business. His friends, the disciples, wanted him to be this powerful Messiah that would overthrow the Roman government and free them from oppression. The masses wanted Jesus to be their constant miracle worker, fixing all their problems for them. The religious and political leaders just wanted Jesus to get in line and not to threaten the hierarchy and the power of his day. All these people had expectations and demands on Jesus' life, but Jesus was confident in who God had created him to be and was willing to even disappoint people so that he could live into his calling, to disappoint his parents and his friends and the masses and the people in power at his time, to be true to the calling God had placed on his life. And one of my favorite passages in all of Scripture is in Matthew 3. At the beginning of Jesus' ministry, the time comes for him to be baptized. And so he goes to the Jordan River and seeks out John the Baptist to be baptized. And here's what happens in chapter 3, verse 16. And when Jesus had been baptized, just as he came up from the water, suddenly the heavens were opened to him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased." At the beginning of Jesus' ministry, God speaks this call of identity over Jesus' life, reminding him who he is, that he is God's beloved Son with whom God is well pleased. Jesus hadn't done anything yet, simply was born and existed in the world, and God said, "I am pleased with you, Jesus." I believe that God doesn't just speak these words over Jesus, but God speaks them over every single one of us, that we are God's beloved children with whom God is well pleased. That Amy, you are God's beloved with whom God is well pleased. That Becky, you are God's beloved with whom God is well pleased. Gus, that you are God's beloved with whom God is well pleased. God speaks that over our lives. But Jesus has this powerful moment where he knows without a shadow of a doubt who he is and what God has called him to do in the world. But the very next thing that happens is really difficult for Jesus. Right after this mountaintop experience, he is entered into the wilderness to be tested. Does that ever happen in your life where you have this mountaintop experience and then it gets really hard right after that? Well, that's exactly what happened to Jesus. And so in the beginning of Matthew chapter 4, here's what happened. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tested by the devil. Okay, hold on a second. Did you catch this? Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tested by the devil. Why in the world would the Spirit lead Jesus into the wilderness to be tested by the devil? Like, what is going on here? Why would that happen? When we look at this passage in the original Greek, the word that gets translated up there, tested, that is a good translation of this verb. But sometimes it gets translated into the word tempted. Sometimes we refer to this passage as the temptation of Jesus. But testing is a much better word because temptation has this negative connotation, right? Like you're leading somebody astray or causing them to do something wrong. But tested has a more positive connotation to it, a strengthening connotation. For example, teachers and lawyers and doctors and pilots, they are all tested before they can perform their vocation in the world. And we're very thankful for that, right? You don't want to go to a surgeon that hasn't passed their boards, going to get an amen, right? So they come out stronger on the other side of their testing, equipped for the job that they are called to do. The same is true with Jesus, that God's Spirit leads him into this time of testing because God knows Jesus will come out stronger through the testing, more equipped for the work that God has for him to do. And so here is how the testing unfolds in verse 2. Jesus fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and afterward he was famished. The tempter came to him and said, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But Jesus answered, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." This first test that Jesus endures is one of productivity. The tempter comes to Jesus wanting him to do something, to turn stones into bread. Jesus hasn't eaten for 40 days, so he's famished. So the tempter's like, can you do something? Can you turn these stones into bread? At this point in Jesus' life, he's about 30 years old, and he's basically done nothing. He's been this marginal figure from the small town of Nazareth. Nobody really knows about him. He hasn't done anything miraculous or powerful that we're aware of. And so he's got this test of productivity. What can you do? What have you done with your life, Jesus? Have you made anything of your life? What difference could you possibly make in the world? And if you think about it, we face this same test almost every single day. I don't think it's a coincidence that Jesus is about 30 years old when he faces this test, because there seems to be something magical about this number 30 in our culture, right? That once you approach that or get there, that you've somehow arrived or done something special with your life. Like, why haven't you got married yet, or had kids yet, or have a better house yet? And the questions just continue as we get older, right? Like, why don't you have more money in the savings account, or more in your 401k, or why haven't you published a book, or done something miraculous and memorable in the world? Why haven't you done something? And we so value productivity in this culture that we've placed so much of our worth and value in what we can do and produce and perform, and we're reminded in this story that that is not where our true identity lies. The second test that Jesus experiences happens in verse 5. Then the devil took him up to the holy city and placed Jesus on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone." Jesus said to him, "Again it is written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." The second test Jesus experiences is one of popularity. Devil comes to Jesus, and Jesus, if you're going to do significant work in the world, then you're going to need some followers. You're going to need some people of influence. Today we might call them social media influencers, right? You need some people following you around to do something. So if you throw yourself off the temple, that will cause people flocking to you. The masses will come to you, wanting to follow you around. You'll be so popular, Jesus. And this is the test that he experiences that I think we also experience almost every single day, where we want other people to like us, and we seek their affirmation and their approval. And if somebody compliments us, our self-image soars, and if somebody critiques us, it tanks. Or we're out there on social media and we just see how many likes we can get, or how many people heart our post, or how many friends we have, right? We just care so deeply about this popularity, and we can almost be like a little lost puppy running around to all these people in our lives. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Does somebody love me? And we can forget that our identity is in being a child of God as we chase after popularity in this world. The third and final test that Jesus experiences occurs in verse 8. Again, the devil took Jesus to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And Jesus said to him, and the devil said to Jesus, "All of this I will give to you if you fall down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away with you, Satan. For it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him." Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him. The third and final test Jesus endures is one of possessions, where the devil says, "I will give you all this wealth and all this money of the world. It can all be yours." And imagine the good you can do with that, Jesus. Imagine the popularity and the power and success you'll have from all of this wealth and possessions. Jesus didn't have anything to speak of at that time, and the devil was offering him everything. And we are tested with the same thing, of wanting to have what everybody else has. Like, oh, do you have the new Apple 14? Do you have the new little AirPod Pro? Or do you have the Hey Dude shoes? Or the Tesla? Or the second house? Or I see some of you eyeing each other up, you know what I mean, right? These possessions that we're so tested by every single day, thinking that somehow we have these, it adds value or worth to our life, and we forget that our identity is back in that baptism scene with Jesus, that you are a beloved child of God, with whom God is well pleased. It doesn't matter your productivity of what you do and what you don't do. It doesn't matter your popularity of how many people know you or don't know you. It doesn't matter about your possessions, if you have the Hey Dude shoes or not. All that matters is that you are loved by God. So this week, I want to encourage you to do some of this hard identity work. To ask the question of, who are you really? And I'm going to give you a couple tips of how to do this important and yet difficult work. The first is to spend some time this week in silence and solitude. Your true self, your soul of who God has created you to be, it's kind of like a wild animal, if you think about it. If any of you have ever walked out in nature and wanted to see wildlife, you know you can't just come stomping through the wilderness and expect to see animals. You have to be quiet and gentle, or sit still in silence and wait for the wildlife to emerge. The same is true with our souls. Now, we can't just be stomping busily through life and expect to see who God has created us to be. We have to be willing to be still and take time in silence to slow down, to listen to what God is speaking to us, to listen to God's voice and not all the many voices that distract us or pull us in so many different ways or have expectations and demands placed on us. It's important to unplug from those voices so that we can figure out, who has God really created me to be? What do I like? What do I dislike? What gives me energy? What drains me? What do I find fascinating? What's my temperament like? And to really explore these questions in silence and solitude. That's part of the reason why this daily devotional is so important, that I've made accessible to you either digitally with the Hope Notes or there are paper copies in the back, because every day begins with 2 minutes of silence and closes with 2 minutes of silence, to encourage us to be still and to know God's presence and to allow God to speak to us in our lives, to remind us that we are God's beloved children with whom God is well pleased. The second might almost seem opposite of what I just said, but is to find some trusted companions. It's important to do this work in silence and solitude alone. And it's also important to have a trusted community of people to walk alongside you in this journey. People who will be your cheerleaders to encourage you to keep on just doing this deep identity work. People who would challenge you, who might see things or blind spots in your life that you can't see yourself. And so some of you may already have this great group of people in your life, and some of you might still be looking for that. And so I invite you, if you're looking for that, just to pray and to ask God, who are some of these trusted companions who can help me on this journey of identity? The third is to be willing to move out of your comfort zone. Doing this identity work can be hard and difficult. It might force you to try something new or to take a risk or step out of the box. And that's important to do that as you discover more and more about who God has called you to be. And the final one then is to pray for courage. It can be scary to do this work. It can be scary to have to disappoint some people who've placed some expectations on your life and be willing to step out of the box and try something new. I heard a story from a pastor this past week who spent over 14 years in pastoral ministry. And his mother, in fact, every time she sent him a birthday card, always wrote pastor on the card instead of his first name. That's how wrapped up his identity was in being a pastor for his mother, that she was just so proud that she had the son as a pastor. But he recently retired from pastoral ministry and is now doing some coaching and consulting work. And it was a courageous step for him because no longer could his mother refer to him as pastor, but actually had to use his first name, again, for the first time in over 14 years. Are we willing to take some of these courageous steps to even maybe disappoint some people who have such deep expectations on our lives, to be true and faithful to the calling God has placed on our lives? So I'm going to invite you to reflect on these 4 areas of ways that you can do this identity work this week. But one last final thing that we can all do this week is that when we wake up and we're getting ready in the morning, that we can look in the mirror and know that we are beloved children of God, with whom God is well pleased. Amy has created this beautiful collage of mirrors for us over here, and one in the center says that you are a beloved child of God. There's a chair in front of it with a stool with some sticky notes of messages that you can take with you to put on your own bathroom mirror, or a pad and pen that you can write your own message to take with you this week. But I'm going to sing a song in this moment as a time of response. And you're welcome to sing along with me if you know it. And also you're welcome to use this time to come forward, to sit before the mirror, to take a note with you, to write your own, and to know that you are a beloved child of God with whom God is well pleased. That is all of our first and primary identity. So as I sing this song, I invite you to sing it together and to, as you feel so led, to go forth, to look at yourself in the mirror and to claim your identity as a child of God. You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies until all my fears are gone. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has called my name. I've been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. You